Welcome to a Legendarium special about my 5 favorite adaptations of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. This is a bit of a change for me. I'll be talking about my 5 favorite movie adaptations of A Christmas Carol and why I believe they stand out. The bottom place on my list goes to a 1999 made-for-television adaptation starring Sir Patrick Stewart. Although Stewart is the biggest name in the list, the supporting cast includes several up-and-comers, most notably Dominic West of The Wire, starring as Nephew Fred. Stewart brings his usual gravitas to the role, but gives us a much more rancorous and fearsome Scrooge than usual. He doesn't simply ignore the solicitors asking for donations to the poor. He hisses, snarls, and bellows at them until they nearly run out the door. When a caroler comes to sing at his doorstep, he lunges at him with a fire poker, making one wonder why someone hasn't pressed charges yet. He gets an acting highlight towards the end of the film when he awakens from his dark night of the soul in his own bed. Wondering if he's still alive, Stewart touches his hand to see if he is really there, appears to have cardiac arrest from the shock, and then suddenly erupts into laughter. This adaptation includes some lesser-used scenes, like Scrooge going to see how some of the poorest and most disadvantaged people in Britain keep Christmas. Though they have nothing, they find happiness in the holiday and each other. However, where this film really fails is in the special effects. Obviously, there are more important things in a film than special effects, but the film uses them frequently, and they did not look that great even in 1999. Now they look as if lifted from a PlayStation 2 cutscene, and this production deserved better. Nonetheless, if you're my age, it's a nostalgic piece. For the number 4 spot on the list, I chose the 1971 special A Christmas Carol. Originally broadcast by ABC Television, it had a brief theatrical run, allowing it to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film in its year. It uses being an animated feature to the greatest advantage possible, drawing impoverished characters like Bob Cratchit as gaunt and haggard, something we rarely see in live-action adaptations for obvious safety reasons. This also allows them to have the ghost of Christmas past always changing, fading in and out, a metaphor for how human memory can change or even fade. A brief but powerful scene shows Scrooge as a child at school bent over a book, then whips through several shots of an aging Scrooge bent in the same sitting position before finishing him as a young man bent over his desk at Fezziwig's warehouse. This shows he did not have much of a childhood, working hard from his earliest days. The greatest impact comes towards the end when we see Scrooge's grave crammed into a crowded pauper's cemetery. He remained cheap even in death. Unfortunately, the adaptation feels rushed because of its 25-minute runtime. A few scenes have been trimmed or removed, and Scrooge even steals some of the solicitor's lines during their exchange to hurry things along. The most jarring moment comes when we see Bob Cratchit mourning his dead son Tiny Tim, which we see for only a few seconds, and it simply doesn't have the impact it should. Nonetheless, this adaptation is worth your time. Next, I chose the 1988 film Scrooged, starring Bill Murray. Like many 80s films, it focuses on the cutthroat world of big business, in this case, network television. Instead of Ebenezer Scrooge, we have Frank Cross, who boasts that he is named after something that people were nailed to. Cross is preparing a hyper-violent Christmas special in which Santa's workshop is attacked by terrorists who must be fought off by gun-toting heroes. It couldn't be further removed from the holiday, but it brings in the ratings, so who cares? Certainly not Cross. Instead of Marley's ghost, Cross is visited by his old mentor, who, of course, foreshadows the 3 Christmas spirits. Of the 3, the best is Christmas Future, a 12-foot-tall angel of death who hides tortured souls inside his cape. The film also makes a good point about the folly of Cross's life choices. He gave up a family life and friendship for his career, but there is already a younger, more energetic executive plainly trying to take his job, showing how fast a career can vanish. However, this film is placed lower for a couple of reasons. First, the Ghost of Christmas Present is a shockingly obnoxious character, constantly slapping around and haranguing Bill Murray's character. How is this supposed to teach him goodwill towards men? And while Bill Murray does caustic sarcasm better than anybody else in the business, it does make his final redemption a little unconvincing. Even his celebration at the end seems more like a psychotic breakdown than rejoining humanity. Yet despite its flaws, it is a memorable film, and I'll always give a movie credit for doing something new and original, even if the results are mixed. At second place, I put the 1992 film A Muppet Christmas Carol. In interviews, Michael Caine said that he intended to play the role as if he were in a Shakespearean theater, even if most of his co-stars were made of felt. This comes through in his performance, especially in the calculated outbursts of anger he uses to frighten his underlings and debtors into submission. Much like Patrick Stewart's Scrooge, he is a much more aggressive and rancorous man, literally throwing people out of his office if they displease him, and destroying the wreath his nephew leaves for him. It is even implied that he is a slumlord, snatching up the properties of his debtors and then allowing them to fall into disrepair. Yet there are many amusing pieces to balance the darker elements, like Gonzo the Great playing Charles Dickens as the narrator, which allows the film to use original pieces of Dickens' wonderful prose. To play Jacob Marley, the production uses Statler and Waldorf, the two critics who always heckle the Muppets from their balcony and now heckle Scrooge for his greed. The production stuffs the sets with sight gags like a giant lobster in a basement window, referencing a line from the book comparing Marley to a bad lobster in a dark basement, one of Dickens' stranger turns of phrase. It also shows a bunny caroler spurned by Scrooge, later huddling in a pile of garbage as a freezing London night falls. My main complaint about the film is that it does not delve much into Scrooge's past, merely showing him as a joyless youth, always preoccupied with first school and then work. And this does not seem to fully explain how he became a corrupt moneylender and slumlord. Finally, my personal favorite adaptation of A Christmas Carol is the 1984 version starring George C. Scott, best known for playing flamboyant military men in Patton and Dr. Strangelove. Originally made for British television, it has the production values and cast of a feature film, with the supporting cast definitely not being overshadowed by Mr. Scott, who mostly gives a low-key performance, rarely raising his voice or making theatrical gestures, yet Scott exudes a coldness and harshness that dampens any holiday spirit. He saves his greatest emotion for the end when he pleads before the ghost of Christmas yet to come to allow him to have a little more time. This film also does something that few other adaptations do, at least successfully. It addresses how a self-serving businessman in Victorian Britain could harm others without turning him into an irredeemable monster. During a brief scene at the London Exchange, Scrooge takes advantage of two other businessmen by price gouging them on the price of grain. One of Scrooge's victims laments that this will raise the price of bread, but in the end, the victim doesn't care enough about them to refuse warehouses stuffed with grain that are available. In the end, Scrooge doesn't care about anything but putting more gold in his coffers, which he will never spend, and making everybody as miserable as he is. The film also communicates the hard realities of Scrooge's upbringing without going over the top. His father, Silas Scrooge, is so resentful of his son for his wife died giving birth to him that he allows young Scrooge only 3 days at home before sending him to Fezziwig's warehouse. There, Scrooge might have taken his kindly master as a better role model, but even then, worth and money are inextricably linked in his mind, and that will cost him dear. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.